Hello and welcome back to the Sunderland Preview Podcast. The lads continue to edge closer and closer to those automatic spots, and now going into the weekend, or Easter weekend as it should be called, they could finally break into the top two and nudge both Peterborough and Hull out of the way and still have some games to spare. However, Friday's game is not going to be easy by any stretch of the imagination. And to discuss Friday's game and our opponents, Oxford United, is one of my favourite returning guests. It's Si from the Fence End Pod. Si, how are you doing? Are you all right, mate?
Yeah, very well. Thank you for having me back on.
It's always good to have someone back on because I don't have to explain the format of the show. I can just say, you know the script, and it's fine, and it saves about 10 minutes of me rambling. So thanks very much for that. I think you're just talking off air before. It's not often I'll listen back to the previous podcast that we did. If I've got a returning guest, I'll kind of just go from now onwards. But I thought, no, I'll listen back to that because I remember specifically tipping you to win the league. And I think first things first, I was super underconfident. I tipped you to win the league, and things have probably, unsurprisingly, knowing me, not gone how I'd thought. It's been a bit of a bizarre season for Oxford. How do you sum it up?
Yeah, it has. We talk, there's always that it's a game of two halves. And if you look at the form table, it's kind of, at the moment, it's been a season of 3/3 where we started really, really badly, which kind of the end of that first sort of quarter of the season as it is now, we got beat by Swindon. There were changes. The goalkeeper was dropped, new goalkeeper came in, and then we went on an unbeaten run, won about 7 on the trot, and everything was looking rosy. And then we kind of ran out of steam a little bit. 1 or 2 injuries playing Saturday, Tuesday, and this sort of this third quarter, if you like, of the season that we've just kind of about completed. We've been inconsistent. So it's been a really odd season, from being shocking at the start to really good in the middle to inconsistent now. So what the remainder of the season will bring, I've no idea.
I don't think there's any other run of form you could have. So there's bad, there's good, there's indifferent. I don't know what the other one is.
No, we'll either do one or it's going to be. And I think that's the weird thing. A lot of we lost to lost to Northampton, who were really, really poor. And a lot of our fans said, well, that's typical of us. We'll go and beat, we'll win the next 2. Lincoln, which we've beat, we won on last Friday. And weird as it might seem with your run of form, I wouldn't be at all surprised to see us get a win. We're that sort of side. I've got no idea whether we'll turn up and be great or turn up and be shocking.
Beauty of football, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, especially third division football, isn't it? You can pretty much, Premier League games, you can, this season there's been a few odd ones, but the vast majority, you kind of get a feel, what's going to happen. And for us this season, that's not been the case. It's been great. It's been hilarious, but it's not one you'd want to bet on.
Sort of, I wasn't planning on asking this question, but I assume, unlike our fans, Goldie and whatnot, who went down to Oxford on the second game of the season and took their ladder to look in, I'm assuming you're not coming on Friday and bringing a big, huge ladder or a drone, possibly, are you?
It would need a big ladder, wouldn't it? No, we'll be watching it on iFollow, which whilst not as, it's obviously not as good as being there. It's provided us with an opportunity to watch the games live, which, it's the next best thing to be in there.
Funny enough, I don't know if this is true or not. I'm guessing it will be. And this sounds like I'm working for the club here. I'm definitely not. But we've invested in a 4-camera angle. Will you get the same as what we get then? Because you might get a slightly better than standard iFollow on Friday.
Right. Yeah. We can choose the audio, but I think I guess we get the same. We'll get the same video feed as you. So that will make it interesting. One of the things that they seem to do on iFollow a lot is show random sort of replays whilst the game's going on, and the number of chances you end up missing. You can hear the commentary talking about what's happening, and you're watching a replay, and it's like, no, we want to watch what's going on. That was, we know he's missed, or we know it didn't happen. So it's like, get back to the proper coverage. So that will be interesting to see. For a 4-camera view, that'll be a novelty.
if you can choose our commentary, ours is great, but Frankie and Danny, obviously former player Danny Collins, and I fully recommend it. Very biased, as they should be. Both Sunderland fans, as they should be. But it's always quite interesting as well when people do listen to the more biased commentary. You see the comments coming out of it, it's quite good. But I love them both personally. But in terms of back to form, I've tried to split it into sort of three halves, as you've touched before, because it has been three thirds, three halves doesn't make sense. That's why I never did maths at school. You began the season really badly, considering lost 6 and 10, I think it was. Why did things start so badly then?
I think a lot of it was a hangover from the playoffs and losing in the playoff final. There was not a lot of time between that and the start of the season. It was a bit of a turnover of players. And I think there was just a certain amount of the players not feeling sorry for themselves, because that's not fair. You know, they want to perform, but there was clearly something that was holding them back. We had Cameron Brannigan as well, which was kept kind of quiet. It was said that he had an eye condition, but it turned out he was very close to losing his sight. He had a serious infection in his eye that was very rare. The eye specialist in the hospitals in Oxford managed to pick it up. So I think there was a certain amount of the players were worried about him, you know, more than just a normal footballing injury. It was kind of, career ending possibly, and you know, would have had a serious impact on his life. So I think there was an awful lot kind of going on around the club. Like I say, the hangover from the playoffs. We never start particularly well under Karl Robinson, and although like you said, we lost 6 in 10, I think we were still better than 2 of his previous seasons with us. So it was, you know, we've really started poorly, and then like we were talking off air, it culminated in losing to Swindon, which you've got a massive rivalry up there. We've got a similar one down here that is hugely intense. And that kind of really made some changes around, in team formation. Simon Eastwood, who's been brilliant for us in goal for 3 or 4 years, was dropped. Jack Stevens, a young lad, has come in and he kept clean sheet after clean sheet. And all of a sudden we looked like we were back to that team that finished, towards the end of the regular season last year, where we were really steamrolling sides. And we went on a great run sort of after that Swindon game.
Funny you mentioned Swindon before. I don't mean to mention it, it could be like me being on a podcast and being spoke to about Newcastle, but obviously we haven't played them since like 98, I think it was. It's been a long time since we faced them. So obviously I've had a guest on this season and we've played them twice. They really hate Chris Maguire, and that's to do with Oxford, isn't it? They really hate him. What did he do again? Remind me of that.
We played them a couple of seasons back, 2 or 3 seasons ago. Last time we played them anyway, down at their place. And they went 1-0 up. We got it back to 1-1 and then 2-1. And you know what Chris Maguire's like.
Quiet, shy, retiring. Yeah.
And he was winding their fans up. He'd scored in the home game as well, and kind of took the mickey out of their fans, jumping in front of their fans, pointing to his name on his shirt, that kind of thing. And at the end of the game at their place, after we've won, he's in their players' faces doing the old kind of boo-hoo eye, with the fists in the eye, oh, boo-hoo sort of thing. And also that was seven in a row we'd beaten them. So he's kind of holding up the fingers, the 2 fingers and the 5, and 7 in a row. And our fans loved him for that, obviously, and they hate him for it, that's football, isn't it? I love, you hear commentators often say, "Oh, you don't want to see that." No, we do. We want to see that. We want to see that all day long.
Yeah, we really do, and it's not like Chris. Like I say, he's very shy and retiring most of the time. But no, we love him. He's a shithouse, and he's one of the best at it. To be fair, especially at this level.
Yeah, I'm glad they still hate him. That's great, because he must still be living in their heads.
I think he'll quite enjoy that as well, actually. Yeah. I was going to come on to this probably a bit later, because obviously I wanted to go through the form and stuff, but you've touched on something there which I had no clue about. The one thing where I was looking at your team and I was looking at, what made you tick last year, what maybe hasn't clicked this year, was Cameron Brannigan, at least statistically. Obviously, I think we spoke about him at the beginning of the season when this wouldn't have been known. And I think I think I asked you, look, if you was to go, how much would you want from in an ideal world? And you said, well, realistically about 2 million, but obviously the climate, COVID and whatnot. His form last year was 33 games, 8 assists, 5 goals, I think it was. This season, 24 games, 1 goal, 1 assist. Obviously, the way I've worded this is a bit harsher before I knew his eye was falling out. But what's kind of happened with his form then? Has that affected his form as well? Because it's a life change in that, isn't it? It's not just an injury.
Yeah, he's spoken about, you know, when it was going on, and nobody knew. Certainly, well, no, I say nobody knew. The fans didn't know what was going on. We were told he had an eye issue that was causing sort of blurred vision, couldn't play. So it was kind of, you know, oh well, hopefully he'll get back fairly soon. And it wasn't until the situation was resolved and he was back in sort of training, but not ready to play, that he gave a couple of interviews, and the club talked about how close he was to losing the sight in his eye. You know, the specialist apparently on over the weekend, I think we had a game against Crewe called off because of COVID, so they arranged that was very, very short notice. I think it was about an hour before kickoff that it got called off. So the players kind of did a little 11-a-side game, just to sort of warm up and warm down really effectively. And he came off with sort of blurred vision. He was complaining of blurred vision. By the weekend, he'd spoken to the specialist, and apparently the specialist said to him, well, we've managed to save the sight in your right eye. The left one we're not sure about yet. And he was, at that point, he didn't realise, I don't think, how serious it was. And he's talked about how it's sort of changed his outlook on football, and how, you know, he really wants to get the most out of what he does now. You know, he realizes how fragile a career can be. So we missed him, you know, tremendously. You're right. He was sort of, he was the heart of the team in so many ways. A lot of the possession went through him, but also his attitude is so spot on. You know, he's not a flash sort of player. I know he loves fishing, so if he's not playing football, he's sat on a riverbank somewhere. He's not off, you know, nightclubbing, and that's not open. But you know what I mean. He's a very down to earth sort of player. And
what's a nightclub again?
Yeah, it's been a while. But we really missed him, and he came back in. I'm trying to think, sort of around Christmas time-ish, something like that, and he's gradually got back to sort of fitness. It's taken him a while to get back to match fitness. And some of our better performances in this sort of slightly iffy run have coincided with him getting back to, you know, to a certain level of form. And on Friday we beat Lincoln in the Sky game, and he was fantastic in that. You know, he was almost back to his old self. So you know, touch wood, for so many reasons. For us as a team, we need him, but also for him getting back to doing what he loves is so important for him as well.
With his eyesight and stuff like that, and is he like, if there's such a word, is he completely cured from it then? Can he see relatively normally?
Yeah, as far as I know, it was an infection. So it rather than a sort of degenerative condition, it was an infection that had got into the eye and was causing an issue. So yeah, that condition, that sort of infection has been treated, and now, you know, touch wood, won't reoccur. But yeah, it's not like a degenerative thing where, you know, he's got to manage it. It's they've dealt with the issue. So yeah.
I feel quite bad now. The way that I wrote the question was well, he's dropped off. Well, it kind of makes sense why he's dropped off now. But but obviously I think completely life changing. But in terms of the players that you lost, now we spoke at length about this particular departure. And funnily enough, I've looked through the team and who's kind of played to replace him. But Rob Dickie obviously went to QPR in the summer for definitely big money at this level. I think it was close to 2.5 million, just under.
Yeah, something, yeah.
And I think when you look at the start of the season and you see that you lose games, and you look at the big loss and you think, it must be maybe Rob Dickie. But I'm looking at the team that you've got now. The centre-halves that you played then are still the centre-halves that you play now. Has Rob Dickie been as much of a miss as you thought he would be?
Yes, and I think at the start of the season, definitely. You know, Rob Atkinson and Elliot Moore are the two centre-halves now. We had another, John Massinio, who's a sort of senior pro, he's in his 30s, been a really good servant for us. He's got a knee injury that means he can't play now. So we're kind of down to two senior centre halves with these two, and by senior, that's stretching the term, because Elliot Moore came to us with very few. First, he came from Leicester. He'd been on loan in Europe to one of the Belgian sides, but hadn't played a huge amount of football. And Rob Atkinson came to us from Eastleigh, where, again, I think he'd started his career at Fulham. He'd lived in Spain as well. He played briefly for one of the sort of lower level Spanish sides. So he's been around a bit, but not at football league level. So I think between them, they've probably only got 50 odd first team games, at this sort of level between them by the start of the season, if that. And it took them a while to get into some kind of form, but they're both good centre halves, and I think Rob Atkinson could well follow Rob Dickie. If we don't go up, he could well progress. He's a very similar player to Rob Dickie. He'll carry the ball out of defence and look comfortable on the ball, but he's a good ball winning centre half as well. So they were the centre half pairing at the start of the season, but they've improved. They've worked together really well as a solid pairing now.
I was going to say it's probably quite I know it got rescinded, but it's probably quite a good thing for Atkinson, because he got sent off on his debut, didn't he? First game, it got rescinded, I think. That could have knocked him, because he's only a kid. He's 20, 21, something like that.
At Lincoln, it was a weird one. If the ref had given him a yellow, which it probably was worth a yellow, he'd have gone, because he was already on a yellow. But it was given as a straight red, which you can then appeal. We got away with it in a way, because, like I say, if the ref had given him a yellow card, nobody would have really said anything, because it was probably worth that. It just wasn't a red card. So he got away with it. He made a few mistakes early on, but he's looking like quite a player now.
Yeah, I've seen he's played I think it's 30 odd games, and I mean, it feels like the season's been about 70 games already, to be fair, but apparently not so. You touched on it before about losing the playoff final. I think, as we know, when you get beaten in the playoff final, your expectations are to miss out on the playoffs completely and go for automatic. You think, I don't want to go through that again. I know he didn't go to Wembley in the way that we did at that point because of COVID and so on and so forth. But you still think, well, I don't want to go to Wembley and do all that again. We don't want to do it 100%, because we've just had enough of the playoffs. We want to go automatic. I think I'd just miss out on the playoffs. Maybe I'd be happy just to buy. I'm just hate them. But because of the shaky start that you had, did that realign expectation? And I know this sounds kind of weird saying, because you're eighth, but I think if anyone looks at the table, it's not beyond the realms of possibility that with a really good, solid run of winning, say, your last 10 games, you could sneak into the top two. But has the expectation come playoffs at best?
Yeah, I think now, looking at your form, Hull, Peterborough to an extent as well, although their form's a bit shaky, I can't see us winning I think we'd have to win every game between now and the end of the season to get into the top two. I think playoffs, I think it's definitely a realistic aim. We look at ourselves in isolation. Like I said, we've had some shaky form the last sort of 6 or 8 games, but so has a lot of the other teams around us. I think as fans, we look at ourselves in isolation and think, oh well, we're in dodgy form, so we've got no chance. But I looked at the form, I think, before the Lincoln game, and out of the top 10, we were in better form than 5 of the teams in the top 10. So I think playoffs are realistic. I think automatics are probably beyond it.
It's a tight table. I mean, I'm just looking at it here. Obviously, I've been concentrating an awful lot on the top 2, as many Sunderland fans will. And it's not just that it's tight on points, because you've got Hull on 70, Peterborough on 69, Sunderland on 67. Then you've got Lincoln, Portsmouth, Blackpool, Doncaster, and then you're just outside of it. In third, we're on 67, but then you've got Lincoln on 62, Portsmouth 58, Blackpool 57, Doncaster 57, Oxford 56, Charlton 56. But you've also got no teams are on the same amount of games, because COVID's had that many cancelled games. You've had teams who've had 3-week layoffs, and you've had other teams that have had no layoffs. Does that kind of make it more exciting, that playoff chase, and knowing that anyone could go anywhere in this season, just a total anomaly?
It does, like I think I said off air, but our fans have gone from, beating Doncaster and Swindon in the space of 3 games and saying, right, that's it. Let's, why can't we make the automatics? That's sort of like about 4 games ago. Then we lost 2 on the trot, including Northampton, and it's sacked the manager. And then we beat Lincoln. First time we won on Sky in a league game at home since last, like 1998 or something. So we never win on Sky. We break that hoodoo. We've beaten a team in Lincoln who were 3rd or 4th at the time, and all of a sudden the fans are back on it again. We're going to get the auto. So you're right. Every game we've played Saturday, Tuesday since the middle of January. It's been absolutely crazy, and this is the first Tuesday this week that we've had off. And it's the 2 games over Easter, we'll probably, we could easily go, like you say, you look at it, we could go 5th, or we could end up sort of 13th, 14th if the results don't go our way. And that's going to be the same thing. Every match day from now to the end of the season is going to be looking at the fixtures and working out who's playing who and what might happen, and it's going to be fun.
I've started doing that thing where you get the League One predictor table, and I don't know why, because since I started the preview show, the start of this season, I haven't had one result right. I might have had the win or the draw or the defeat correct, but not once have I got the actual scoreline right. So me doing the predictor table is just pointless. There's just no point in me doing it, but I've still done it nonetheless. It's interesting you touched on Karl Robinson there and some fans calling for him to be sacked at points. There's always a minority that will want something different to maybe the rest of the fan base, because outside looking in, it hasn't looked like he's been under pressure. But because of the way the season's been, because it's been on TV essentially, not at the ground. Like for example, with Sunderland, I think one of the big things this season, I think Phil Parkinson probably lasted longer than he would have done. If I think the fans were there, he would have been gone by the time we'd lost our 3rd home game or something like that, considering it was more than we'd lost in 2 years. How have you found the Oxford fan base? Obviously, running an Oxford United podcast, you'll see all that reaction in the immediate aftermath, and everything's done digitally now. So people go straight onto Twitter, straight onto Facebook, quicker than they had done last time. Are you finding it's more reactive than it would be normally, or has not much changed?
No, I think you're right. I think it probably, it's more reactive online, like you say. I can imagine the Sunderland fans, if things aren't going well, 30 or 40,000 of you in there giving the manager pelters, it's going to impact on the owners thinking about what they're going to do. And I think some clubs have found it easier. There's no pressure from fans to either get it forward or what you're doing. If something goes wrong, there's noise from the crowd. It's benefited some teams. I think Karl's, some fans will always moan whatever happens, but I think generally our fans like him. He talks like a fan. If things are going well, he's absolutely wonderful. If things aren't going great, there are times that he'll sort of criticize players and you think, why the hell's he done that? But he's done that with a couple of our players who many of us thought in January there were a couple of players that would probably leave the club, because of how he talked about them, how they performed. And Dan Adji and Mark Sykes have since then come back into the side and almost been instrumental. And it's kind of, his man management is for some players, you kind of think, are you doing that the right way? But he's kind of getting results with the way he has done it. And I guess football is very different to a normal workplace. Your manager's not, my manager won't go and talk to the press about how I'm performing. It's, so I guess football is slightly different in that respect. But no, I think with a lot of the stuff he's done off the pitch as well, he's got a lot of credit with Oxford fans for the way he's managed a lot of things, with the COVID stuff that he's done very well, and players as well, with 1 or 2 players with sort of family issues, where his whole thing is, no, you need to be right with your family. It doesn't matter about the football. If you need to go and sort that out, you go and sort that out. And he's kind of, that's reflected very well. He's got credit for doing those sort of things off the pitch.
I think he's quite well liked. I mean, because I'll be honest, he comes across a bit of an irritant from a Sunderland perspective. But we've had the MK1 podcast been on twice, and obviously we've delved back into MK Don's history, which isn't that long, but nonetheless. They've mentioned obviously about Karl Robinson when he was manager, and they always speak quite well of him. It seems like people, is it a case of when he's the manager of your club, you like him, and outside he's a bit of an irritant?
Yeah, I think that probably does sum him up. He's like a lot of players. You kind of, if he's playing for your team, you love him. If he's playing for someone else, you hate him. And I think he's very much like that. He talks like a fan. I'm not sure if I mentioned this on a previous podcast, but we had a chap called Womble, a diehard fan of ours who everybody knew, who passed away a year or so ago, sort of before the COVID thing, nothing to do with COVID. And his funeral was on a Friday. For some reason, we didn't have a game on the Saturday, so the players had been given the weekend off. Karl had gone up to Liverpool to see family, but had driven back on the Friday to attend the funeral for him, and then was driving back again to Liverpool. And it was kind of like nobody expected him to turn up, but it was. I think one or two people spoke to him there. He said, "No, we in the pre-season we played Rangers in a pre-season, and Womble was ill at the time, and the club had arranged for him to be a guest of honour at Ibrox, and they'd done some nice things for him there." And Karl was like, "No, I wanted to be here," and it was, I think, for a lot of people that summed him up. He was doing the right thing, and he does do the right thing for the club. He's talked a lot about building the club slowly and properly and building foundations, and I think he's certainly done that with the squad he's building. We've got a lot of young players that have some value. You're right. Before he came to us, I'd have had that same opinion of him. He's a gobby scouser, and I think but now he's our gobby scouser. So he's kind of that. We've mellowed towards him definitely, and I think he's mellowed as well. He's still only early 40s, so he's managed a hell of a lot of games. I think he's done probably 400 or 500 games now, but he's still quite young, so he's still learning, he's still developing.
When you look through players and managers who are irritants, and I'm sure there's a exception to the rule that somebody will point out, but I think 9 times out of 10 it tends to be the ones that get on your nerves tend to be winners, if that makes sense. Like Craig Bellamy, honestly, on the football pitch, couldn't stand him. Quite like him as a pundit. When I've seen him, he seems okay. But the reason I didn't like him is because I knew he'd do anything to win. Suarez was another big one. Like Bellamy's probably the only player that I've ever feared of Newcastle when we played them, back when he was playing for them. And it's probably just down to that. A lot of it was just him being a winner. And Karl Robinson, to be fair, does come across like that. He seems to be the kind of person where if you're not winning, it gets under his skin. And you kind of want that at your football club, I think, don't you?
Yeah. It's something for the fans to rally around. He's the figurehead. He does talk like a fan. But yeah, you're right. I think going back to our rivalry with Swindon, for 3 or 4 games, their goalkeeper made loads of errors. He got sent off. He had a clearance closed down. If he'd have had brilliant games against us, we'd hate him, but we laugh at him because he was rubbish. And I think you're right. If there's a player in an opposing side, your rivals, who does well and always scores against you, you hate him because they're successful, they're winners. I think you're right. He's done well, and I think the fans will continue. Whatever happens this season, I think they'll back him.
When you look at Steve Evans is probably he's probably the definition of irritant. But to be fair, not many people spoke up him last year when Gillingham was sitting mid-table. Now they're kind of making that sort of push at the playoffs and upsetting a few teams. Suddenly people get really frustrated by him. And another option would be obviously Joey Barton. We haven't beaten the Joey Barton team since we've came down. So whether we want to admit it or not, he became an irritant. We beat his team on Saturday. Couldn't care less. It was quite funny because he was a loser in that extent. So I think that's probably what it comes down to. Now, in terms of players that he's brought in as well in January, we both loaned players from Rangers, obviously a club that I keep a close eye on. Jordan Jones, although he's been injured for the past few weeks, has worked out an absolute treat for us. Brandon Barker, very much divided opinion at Glasgow Rangers. I think probably wasn't quite the quality that Rangers needed, which is, it's no shame. It really isn't, not at the moment. But he looks like he's done okay at Oxford. He scored 2 goals, played about 14 games, a couple of assists. How impressive has Brandon Barker been?
He can be very, very impressive. And, it takes us back to that third division footballer thing, where if he could play like he can play every single game, he would be still at Rangers, or he would have still been at Man City, where I think he came from originally. You know, he's got unbelievable pace, and he's one of these players that doesn't look like he's trying to run. He just glides. He's very quick. He's very direct, and we beat Doncaster 3-0, and he played in that game brilliantly. Everything he did was looking forward. It was, as soon as he got the ball, he was either looking to dribble past the fullback or just knock the ball past him and roast him for pace. But equally, he can, you know, there'll be 50-50 tackles where he just doesn't look like he wants to get involved. But there've been signs sort of recently where he's tracked back really well and got a tackle in, and looks like he's doing the dirty stuff, you know, the hard work stuff, the stuff you've got to do as a winger, and track back and help your fullbacks. He's a player that really could be some player if he got every aspect of his game right, and not just the flash stuff. But yeah, if he clicks in these last few games, you know, he's going to be a real asset.
It's funny with Brandon Barker, because I don't really want to mention this because I feel quite bad picking on anyone's appearance, but there was a photo going around. I don't know if it made it towards you, where he's got a bit of a receding hairline going on. Did that make it that far down south?
I haven't seen it, but I do know what you mean. We had a player play for us, guy called Danny Hilton, who was very similar, who clearly didn't want to admit, you know, that it was receding. And Danny scored in one of the Johnson Paint Trophy final. Scored with a header, brilliant. He's gone over celebrating, and then he's realised, and he's brushed his hair forward to make sure, because he's obviously going to be on telly, that it was kind of like, Danny, you know, you just accept it. It's gone, you know.
Just shave it.
It does look. Yeah, I'm sort of starting to go at the peaks, but not too bad. But he's fighting a losing battle there, isn't he?
I think so. I think you need to do it. To be fair, it hasn't harmed him in any way, shape, size, or form. If he does feel conscious about it, Charlie Wyke obviously has a really obvious hair transplant, and the hair transplant has transformed him from being a 5-goal-a-season striker to a 26-goal-a-season striker. So I can recommend it if that is the secret formula. In terms of other players that Oxford have, obviously for me, you've got one of the strongest sides in the division. I think the start of the season is obviously affected you, and that's where you are outside of the playoffs at the moment. But good side, I think outside of those 6 games you lost in the first 10 games, you've only lost about, I think it's 7 since, winning like almost double the amount of games. But which players are currently on form for Oxford? Which ones do you think could damage us? Who should we look out for?
Matt Taylor, who's our centre forward, he's a local lad that started as a youth team player with us, but then sort of went off and was at Bristol Rovers, Bristol City, Forest Green, and he's come back to us now. And he scored. He was on 10 goals by about Christmas and was looking really good, and then hadn't scored for about 10 or 12 games, and then scored 2 against Doncaster, I think. He's the sort of player that could easily go on a run now and get 10 goals between now and the end of the season. And he's just hit a bit of form. Mido Shadipo is a lad we've got on loan from QPR. He's a winger. Again, he's that kind of third division winger. So he can be outstanding or he can be anonymous. And you know, we just hope he's going to be the former. Cameron Brannigan coming back into form has been important for us. We've had a lot of injuries, so it's been difficult for the team to settle and be sort of used to playing with each other. We've had sort of pretty much every game 3 or 4 changes to the side. So it's Sam Long, who played really well at the start of the season as a right back. He's been injured. And it's been a lot of changes, so it's difficult for players to get settled in. But I think if Matt Taylor, he sort of relishes the big games, and obviously this is going to be a big game. No fans there, obviously, but regardless of that, the stadium and the whole sort of how important the game is going to be for both sides. He'll like that. He'll want to score.
On the flip side, normally, I think whenever we've discussed the preview game, we've inevitably, as we already have done, talk about Chris Maguire. And, naturally when a former player that you've loved comes up against you, you go, well, he's the one that worries me the most. But to be honest with you, he's probably unlikely to be in the side. He's not really played that much this season. He's kind of been off the bench now and again, and he was in our under 23 side to build up minutes during the week. Scored a great goal, as he can do, but I doubt he's going to be in the side. So he's not been outcast, but he's not played often enough for me to think he would start on Friday. So which parts of the Oxford side are currently weakest, and which players do you actually worry could damage you from our side?
Unfortunately, both those things tally up, and it's our fullbacks. We've, like I mentioned, Sam Long, he's been out injured. Josh Ruffles, who plays the other side, twisted a knee against Lincoln. He might be out as well. So we'll have midfielders operating as fullbacks. So Aidan McGeady would be the one. He seems to have really sort of come back into the side with the new manager, and him and Wyke seem to have quite a partnership where I always thought McGeady was a cracking player at this level. When we've played you in the past, he's always been a threat, and against fullbacks that aren't really fullbacks, it's going to be. I'm crossing my fingers and hoping Sam Long gets fit and Josh Ruffles' knee isn't too bad, but that could be, they could be in for quite an afternoon.
It's quite funny. I'm kind of like licking my lips at the thought of it, forgetting that our right back's actually a central midfielder and our centre half's actually a number 10. But it's just been one of those kind of runs of form where Max Power, who's currently playing right back, and Luke O'Neill, who's playing at centre back, have been two of our best players out of position. It feels like the start of a lining, but I'm ready for it to crumble, if you know what I mean. So it brings me, as always, onto the question, which I always get wrong, as I mentioned before, score predictions. It's been 1-1 every single game that we've played at the Stadium of Light, and just about every one apart from the start of this season. But I think we'll win, and I'm really superbly confident. I think we're going to go up. I think we're going to win the league. So I'm going to say 2-1. We haven't had a 2-1 for a while off the top of my head, but where's it you're going?
It's such a hard one for us as Oxford fans to guess, because of the way we've been playing. Like I mentioned, we won on Sky Sports for the first time in a league game in 5 years. First time. So we've broken a hoodoo there, and it would be just like us to lose to Northampton and then beat Lincoln and then beat you. I'd love a 1-1. I'd happily take 1-1 all day long. The head is saying a Sunderland win. The heart is saying, why not? Why can't we win it? I think it could be 2-1 the other way. I'm going to go for 2-1 Oxford. I've got to back my team.
Yeah, of course you have to. But Si, thanks as always for popping on, mate. Always good catching up. No luck on Saturday. Friday. Yeah. The game's Friday. Yeah. I don't know what day it is, to be fair. But I won't wish you luck for that. But after that, of course, good luck, especially if you come up against the likes of Hull or Peterborough, which you might be playing towards the end of the season, I think.
I'm trying to think if we've got. Let me have a very, very quick look.
You did us a bit of a favour against Lincoln, so I would appreciate it if you could take a couple of points off them.
You're the only team above us now that we've got to play. This is the last of those games above us. So we can't do you a favour, unfortunately.
You've done one already, so thank you for that. But wish you good luck for the rest of the season after Friday. And thanks for coming on as always, Si. Cheers, mate.
Thank you for inviting me, and good luck for the rest of the season. Cheers.
Thanks, Jack.